Welcome to the Go Big with Gib podcast, a place for professionals, business owners, and entrepreneurs to talk about their big wins. Hey, Chris, how are you today?
Doing great, Gib. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for coming on to the program today. I really appreciate it. To get things started, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. My name's Chris Detert, and I'm the Chief Communications Officer at Influential.
Cool, man. So, Chris, you and I have known each other. I was thinking about it earlier today. I think we have known each other for about 25 years.
Really?
Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, we were kids. So, I don't feel as bad knowing that we were kind of kids. But yeah, 25 years. That sounds about right.
Yeah, I'm dating us a little bit, but
a lot.
But I did think about it. I think that if my recollection is correct, I think we started hanging out and got to know each other back in about 1998, probably.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Because I was a freshman at Pepperdine, and you were a year ahead of me, I believe.
Yep. Class of 2001.
Okay. Yeah, because I ended up graduating in December of 2001, and I think you graduated that May.
Yep, correct. You were always an overachiever.
Yeah. I graduated one semester early. That's right. So, Chris, back in the day, we used to play in a band together, and I wanted to talk about that just a little bit because I know we're going to go through. I want to talk about your entrepreneurial journey and things of that nature. But, back in the day, we used to play music when we were students at Pepperdine. We used to play at the Malibu Inn, and we had a weekly gig there. You remember that place? Of
course. How can I forget? It's funny. It's still there, but now it's a fashion store, and then it's been gone for quite a while. I'm sad to see it, but the bones of it still looks the same externally, but it's now a store called Aviator Nation.
I think I remember that because, I was out in L.A. Back around the end of May, and I believe you and I got together on May 31st. We met at the coffee shop in West Hollywood, and I had just come from Malibu that day and seen that place. So it's a fashion shop?
Yeah, it's the whole entire place, before it was like half restaurant, half bar. The whole thing is like a showroom for this brand, and it's sort of like it's kind of got like a little rock and roll edge to it. So I think they converted that area into like a stage studio sort of environment. So it sort of still lives on, but it's different now, very much. It's not a place you can go in there and grab a drink and watch a music set every night, but it's still sort of there.
Yeah. You remember that guy Sammy that used to run?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Whatever happened to that guy?
I don't know. I think I remember, in the ensuing years, seeing him in, because I moved into Los Angeles and started my career there. I remember seeing him in like the nightclub scene and stuff like that, pouring drinks at other places and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. That's a blast from the past.
Yeah, I remember him. But yeah, we used to play a bunch of covers. I remember I was thinking about it today, trying to think of all the bands that we used to cover. I know we played Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots. I remember we did some Creed songs. It looks like they're back together playing again.
I saw that. There's a bunch of bands that are now hitting their like 20 or 25 year anniversary, and they're coming back out, and it's funny now because you'll listen to like a classic rock station and that's the stuff. So we are officially vintage.
Yeah, I think our style was basically, it was 90s rock and 2000s, basically 90s, mostly 90s.
Yeah.
And then
it was
early
the grunge
2000.
Era. It was totally the grunge era, then mixed with a bunch of Rage Against the Machine. that was your special vocal cameo.
Yeah, that was my little moment to shine, or I guess you could call it. But yeah, we used to do so many cool songs. You know, one day we'll have to. So do you think you still have your singing chops? I mean, I'm sure you've either got them or you don't.
I'm better now than I ever was.
I'm not surprised by that. I mean, I know that we've jammed a couple of times since, you know, the band, and I do remember that you were better every time that we played together. And so have you had the opportunity to play much music over the last couple of years? I mean, I know you're super busy with your company, and we've got, you know, grown up jobs, so to speak. But do you get to play music anymore?
Yeah, you know, not much. I wish more. I did get to do I mean, it's funny with business. It's sort of like a secret weapon for me now. I have a lot of, like, you know, business social things that end up at karaoke bars, and people are like, "Oh, damn." Surprise us with that. So I would say that might be some of it that still keeps alive. You know, when I'm in my car to myself, of course. But then also for my 40th birthday party, my wife hired the band Hours, which is one of my favorite bands of that era, and I got to perform with them, which was amazing. And then like a year or two later, this was actually coming right out of the pandemic because I got COVID that night, actually. But I went to the Viper Room, and I was enjoying myself, being completely unassuming. And the last song of the night is always this one called "Fallen Souls," and I just, you know, kind of from the back, like, yelled it out. And then he invited me to come up and perform it on the stage with them. And so yeah, I mean, I have now performed at the Viper Room, so I guess that would be my one. That would be the one thing I could say that I've done that has been sort of elevated. But aside from that, yeah, not too much, but I know I still got it. And luckily I'm not like that old yet. So, you know, when you get older, your voice really changes. Like, you know, Robert Plant can't sing like he used to or whatever. I'm still young enough that I can pull that off for at least a few more years.
That band that you mentioned, Hours, I think I've seen some pictures of you from the Viper Room that night.
Yep.
Those
guys lives on my Instagram.
Yeah, I think you pinned it to the top of your Instagram, right?
It's one of my favorite memories, yeah.
So those guys, have they been around for a long time? I mean, they're like one of your favorite bands?
Yeah, one of my absolute favorites. Yeah, I saw them while I was in college, probably 98 or 9 or so. I drove from Malibu all the way to the Viper Room. It was like an hour drive, and was completely solo, didn't have tickets. Saw the lead singer, Jimmy Necco, who's now a dear friend of mine, and told him that I had driven an hour away and that I didn't have any tickets. And he put his arm around me, walked me into the venue, and then, you know, then proceeded to do one of the most epic shows I've ever seen. It kind of was one of these things for me that was like, oh shit, I'm never going to be good enough at this. Like, I saw like true greatness that night, and it sort of like made me like sober up to the reality that maybe like music wasn't going to be my thing. But, you know, I tried for a couple of years. I was, you know, like you, I was at the firm, the entertainment management company, in the early 2000s. And I think my hope was that I would, you know, end up meeting the pivotal people that would see my talent and whatever. But fact of the matter is, when you're working as like a grunt assistant sort in a management company, they're not going to really see you in that light. So, you know, eventually things, you know, looked up for me, and I was able to transition out of the firm into a company called Von Dutch in 2003. And, you know, that was sort of like a pivotal career change. And then after that, you know, I always had the love for singing, but I never like, you know, I never really tried again to like make it like a full on professional thing.
So I know the firm has changed a lot. You know, I don't even know if it's still around. I'm sure you know.
It is. Yeah, Jeff
Quantance still over there?
He's still at the helm, and yeah, they've relaunched it. Yep. I believe it's much more like heavily favored in terms of film and television now, as opposed to the music side that it was before. Haven't heard much. They didn't. You remember when we were there? It was, you know, it gotten up to 250, 300 people. I don't know if you knew this. Steve Bannon was working there when we were there. You know, the Trump advisor.
Yeah, Yeah, I saw he was a Trump advisor, and some people messaged me and said, "Hey, this guy was at the firm back when you were there.
Yeah,
Do you remember him?" And I don't
absolutely.
remember him
No.
being there, but I remember the name, but I don't remember meeting him or having any interaction with him.
Yeah, I remember meeting him on numerous occasions, and running around the mailroom basically, and would stop in his office. He was always very short, kind of curt answers and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, no idea at the time who he would end up becoming. And it became one of those things, I think, maybe 7 or 8 years ago when Trump got into office, all the firm people were calling around and being like, can you believe that that's Steve Bannon? So, yeah, it's pretty wild to think that that was the case. But yeah, I mean, that was a fun time. I mean, the firm was a wild, it was that rock and roll story. There was all these crazy moments that happened there, and interesting people that came through there. A lot of people that are still very, very successful in all these different realms. So whenever I reconnect with anybody from there, it's always great times to kind of reminisce about all the cool things that we did back then and see where everybody is now.
That was a really cool time, and I remember some of our favorite bands were with the firm at the time, so it was an opportunity to just never know who's going to walk in the door on any given day. They had some movie people at the time as well, but for us as musicians, I remember, it was constant. Every day it was somebody new on the elevator that you got an opportunity to talk to and build a relationship with, and it was a fun time. How long were you there, Chris? I don't remember the exact dates of when I was there, but I know I went to work there. I think Kai got the job. I think Kai got the job over there first, right?
Yep.
And then you went over there, and then I joined after that. And I think I left before you did.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I think you might have been there a year to year and a half at most. I was there like 2 years. I went in shortly after 9/11, actually. I think it was about 2 months later than that. And then, I was there until 2003. And then the manager of the band, Stained, Gail Bowler, had actually referred me to this company, Von Dutch, that ended up being sort of my change up in my career that sort of, really catapulted me. But yeah, that was 2003.
You had a lot of opportunity at Von Dutch. I know that was a big change for you going from the music, the entertainment industry into fashion. Is that the appropriate thing to call it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to me about that. So, when did you transition over to Von Dutch, and how did that go for you?
Yeah, so like I said, 2003. Gail from the firm, who was one of the founders and managed the band Stained and worked with Korn. She had said,
I remember Gail. Yeah,
Gail was
super
great.
nice. I think she had didn't she have Static X and some other
Static X and Power Man 5000, and fun group of hard rock. She was like a hard rock chick. She was awesome, and she had told me about this opportunity, and I wasn't particularly trying to be a fashion guy. I wasn't when she said it at first, it wasn't like, oh yeah, definitely. But, I think I had just kind of been stagnant, had been in mailroom situations, had worked as a mailroom guy for so long that I kind of wanted something that was just, a next step. And then I saw, I took the interview based on her recommendation. And then I remember walking into the office, and it was just this very raw, new energy. And there was this stop sign shaped table, very customized, very cool, California sort of table with just a mess of pictures all over it. And I just started sifting through them, and it's kind of how they're, instead of a magazine or whatever, they're kind of just a little bit rebellious and just have this mess of pictures. As I'm, sorting through them, I'm seeing, Chris Cornell, who was then an audio slave, and Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake and Fred Durst and all sorts of interesting celebrity type of people, and they were all wearing this brand. I didn't, this was pre social media too. This was something that would had kind of captured people's attention and became a cool thing before there was ways to really push that out. So it was much more celebrity fashion magazines that were the ones that were like exposing this. And then we had like a website that we sort of treated like social media. We had, anytime we get celebrity photos, we would actually post them on our website in like a pop-up. And then we had like a grid of like all the celebrities that were on there. So we would always, monitor the traffic, and we got a lot of traffic to our website because we were sharing these celebrity photos through our website. So it was sort of like a early form of celebrity marketing, celebrity social before that even existed.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember seeing all those pictures of you. I mean, it seemed like, we had that similar experience at the firm, in that it was a revolving door of really talented people coming by there, people that were, musicians and actors and actresses, and then you just had like ultra celebrities coming into Von Dutch, and it was a very edgy company.
Yep.
And it was really hip. And I mean, tell me a little bit about your role there, and how it changed over the time that you were there.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. I came in there, I guess, at sort of a perfect time. I was 24 years old, and I came over as the marketing assistant, and I did that for, I would say, like maybe about a year. And then the woman that I was working under, she was the head of marketing, was feeling like, it was like two European guys that just like were giving her a hard time. And one day she just said, screw it, and bailed. And then I walked into their office, and I just, I was like, well, she just left. What's going on? And they're like, well, you're now her. So yeah, then by, I was 25 years old at that point, and I was, heading up the marketing for a multi-$100 million fashion brand that was all celebrity driven. And it was funny because I guess in that like year period of time anyway, I'd like taken to the celebrity side of, celebrity relations side of things. The office was above the store. And so, I basically, if I didn't call them myself, the celebrities myself, I would literally get like a buzz from the store manager downstairs, and it would be like, oh, Beyonce just walked in. And it was that kind of thing wasn't irregular. And there was a day that there was Beyonce and Sheryl Crow walked in independently of each other, 40 minutes apart. And that was just sort of like the magic of the time of that place. It was just something else. And, we kind of, we had a methodology of product placement that was basically like, if celebrities came in, we gave them a whole bunch of stuff. We had a custom shop within the back of the store where we had sewers and designers, and we could make custom things like really quickly. And so, we became this destination, and the word amongst the celebrity community spread. And, before long, we had just about every major celebrity in there. And we had a designer, a very eccentric designer, Christian Audiger was his name. He passed away a few years ago of cancer. But he went on to do his brand Ed Hardy and Christian Audiger, and was a very big figure in the industry, but he was very bombastic. I mean, I remember he would ask us to like pop flashes with cameramen when he'd walk into the room, and he was always trying to like do the hype. Yeah, it was a little ridiculous, but he was always trying to do the hype thing, and made it so that anytime a celebrity came in, it was obviously good to get pictures of them in Von Dutch itself, but then aside from that, we would always end up doing pictures with them. So as a result of that, I think I have 200 plus photos of me with celebrities. A lot of them, the majority of them are actually in the store when they would come and visit. But then eventually I started traveling to movie awards and music awards and different shows like that, and doing gifting lounges and all sorts of celebrity product placement stuff. And so during that 3-year period, I worked there from 2003 to pretty much like the end of 2005. I amassed this huge celebrity picture collection, which then ended up being printed and put on my wall at the PR company I started, and I had like a whole wall of fame for that. So all good memories.
Yeah, I remember. What was it? I think you had a picture with Jay-Z. Is that? Is that true? You had a picture with Jay-Z, and I
Mhm.
think, I mean, I know there was hundreds of
Mhm.
people, and hard to pick out just a few, but
Well,
I think Dennis Rodman used to come in and see you from time to time. Is that right?
that's very, very true. Yeah, the Jay-Z picture is another one of my pinned photos on Instagram. I think it was just such an amazing thing at the time that, he came in and he immediately put on, a hat and a t-shirt, both emblazoned with the Von Dutch logo. And, that's not something that happens anymore. Like celebrities of that magnitude don't become, like just, posters for a brand like they did then. And, that was just amazing. I mean, got that photo with him and then loaded him up with a ton of clothes. And then he proceeded to wear it like almost every day on his tour for like, the next 6 months. So, yeah, it was a really powerful thing that we were doing. We were seeing the clothes in, music, and in TV shows and movies. And so it'd constantly be popping up in popular culture. And so through that period of time, I'd say 2003 to six, you saw so much Von Dutch. I mean, I remember I'd go to nightclubs in LA and like half the entire crowd was wearing Von Dutch or at least a trucker hat. That fashion trend was just, it's so indicative of like, it's funny now, like to show us how old we are, the kids who are, their early 20s are having Y2K parties, millennium parties, and they're wearing the Von Dutch hats. So kind of fun to see.
Let's talk about the business side of that a little bit. So
Well,
back then, was Von Dutch paying the celebrities to wear those clothes, or were the celebrities just coming in and getting free clothing and then going out and wearing it, all the time and bringing more business to the Von Dutch brand? And how did that work?
Yeah, definitely the latter. There was never, ever any celebrity that was paid to wear Von Dutch. And I think that was part of the magic of it. It was that it was like, it was so coveted, it was so highly desired, it was so trendy, that yeah, the celebrities, it became the cool kids club. I think, big celebrities, and I guess this is sort of the life cycle of it. Big celebrities would be wearing the biggest A-list, A-plus list celebrities, and then it would have this, trickle down effect, and eventually it got to like D-list celebrities. And I think one of the issues of the brand, aside from many others, was that it's sort of we didn't have like a barometer of like a lot of the best brands that stay around for a long time keep a standard, and they say this is who we'll give it to. Well, not everybody. Kind of gave it to everybody. Unfortunately, it just became such a celebrity copycat sort of thing that it had filtered down into like the reality show stars and really cheesy people. So yeah, and also at the same time, it was sort of like the end of a life cycle of fashion. Like this trucker hat trend wasn't going to last forever. So it was a good run, though. Hell of a run. It's still something to this day that is very interesting to people. I remember for probably 10 years after that, I would go to universities and speak on like the rise and fall of Von Dutch. It's so long ago now that it's like an irrelevant conversation. But I remember thinking, that the college students thought it was so cool. Like they were so intrigued by it. And, it really was, one of the last independent brands of its kind. It never really reached out, like it got everywhere, but it just ran out of steam, like just about then before it became a really, really big deal. It probably was in, the $200 million range when it was at its peak, but it unraveled very quickly. And it's funny to see, there are some brands of that same era, like True Religion jeans came up around the same time. And not that they're like the coolest brand or that they're a major deal still, but they're they do a couple $100 million in revenue and they're a healthy company. And there's definitely a way that if that company had been operated correctly, could have lasted longer.
So is Von Dutch still around right now?
Yeah, it's still around. And in fact, it's kind of become retro. So a lot of the, a lot of the kids are wearing it now as like this retro cool thing. And, you had Kylie Jenner was wearing it for a little while and it got a hype thing. And, it ended up on TikTok a bit too. And so, yeah, it's around. I don't think I'd be surprised if it's ever what it was. But yeah, it's still around. And, I actually bought a hat say maybe 2 years ago or something. I'd never seen a model that was just all blacked out, black patch, black everything. And I was like, all right, the styles at the time were very bright and outlandish. This is like low key. And, as much as I was like, all right, well, kind of like wearing a relic, it's like, I was the head of marketing for this relic. So, I was hoping that if anybody sees it and goes, oh, that's cool, I'll be like, oh yeah, I used to do that. But yeah, kind of funny.
Yeah, it'd be a good conversation piece.
Exactly.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think I heard you speak on another podcast where you talked about Kylie Jenner wearing it and that giving a little bit of a boost to the brand.
Yeah.
I'm sure that helped.
Yeah. No, that's a huge thing. I mean, the Kardashians and the Jenners are beacons of trends, and when they do something, people follow suit. So I'm sure they got like a really nice spike from that, but she didn't continue to wear it, and I don't think that they were compensating her to wear it. So I haven't seen too much of it recently.
Yeah. So what did you do next after that? I'm assuming this is when you started your own PR company, American Rebel.
That's correct. So I did that until, like I said, the end of 2005.
And did you have any carryover from your time at Von Dutch in terms of the people that you worked with? Were there people you had met and relationships that you had made at Von Dutch that translated over to American Rebel?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a big part of it. And it was actually cool because at the time what I was doing was like some of the times I would go, when it was Von Dutch, they didn't want, because they had their own store and impressive place. So they had, if I was going to go do celebrity placements, they wanted it to happen over at the store. So I would go over there and I would go do my store thing like I'd usually do, but fake it till you make it in the beginning. So I would bring like a whole bunch of shoes from Osiris in my trunk, and after I'd have them come and get laced up in the Von Dutch gear, I would take them to the back alley and I'd open up my trunk like it was like all the stuff was hot or something. And I would show them shoes and get them to put them on. And, a lot of my early shoe pictures for Osiris were literally like in a parking lot because I had just like given them out of my trunk or whatever. But I tried to do what I could to in fact, in the early, before I even got an office, Osiris was adamant about sending me out shoes. So they sent me out like a few hundred pairs. And I lived in a small house in Laurel Canyon, and I didn't have room for them. So literally had a tent in my backyard, a big tent, like you could like live in it sort of tent. And this tent was like my entire storage closet. And, it's amazing that like there was never like a weather incident that like, it rained, but like that was a good tent. But yeah, that stuff, I mean, if anybody knew that it was in my backyard and could have hopped the fence and gotten away with it. So I'm in it again, fake it till you make it. At great risk of the brand. I kept this shit in my tent for like, I don't know, several months at least. I remember I had the singer Brandy wanted some stuff. Actually, she wanted some Von Dutch. And then I told her when I was over at the store about the shoes, and she wanted some like right then. So I was like, all right, well, the only way is to like come up to my house. So she followed me up to my house and sat in my living room and threw a soggy tennis ball to my dog, who kept bringing him back to her. And I was like, all right, let me go back to my storage and get you, some shoes. So I ran back to my tent and loaded up, 10 boxes of shoes, and she tried them on right there. And the photos were actually, it was funny. I remember delivering the photos to the brand, and it looked like it was kind of on like a dingy couch in my place. So, they were like photoshopping like fake backgrounds around her and stuff to like, not make it look so crappy. But shortly thereafter, I ended up, I think it was only maybe 4 or 5 months total that I didn't have an office when I started American Rebel. So by 2006, like mid 2006, I had the American Rebel office, which was, one office space, maybe like 1,500 square feet. And eventually I ended up expanding and having 4 offices in that same building. And it was unreasonably cheap for LA. I mean, literally like $1,500, like $1 a square foot per unit. And you just don't see that anywhere. This guy who was, probably in his 80s and, owned the building and just, And that there's a show from the 70s called Three's Company, and there was a guy named Mr. Furley, and he looked like Don Knotts, the actor. Mr. Furley was a goofy old man, but he never raised rent, and he kind of like helped me like grow the company. As I'd succeed, I would get another office and get more employees. And I think at the height, American Rebel PR was 17, maybe 20 employees. Did it completely bootstrapped, didn't know anything about raising money at the time. So, I didn't even think about doing that, which was probably a mistake in terms of the long-term health of it. But just the same, I wouldn't change the path or the trajectory or what happened, throughout the journey. But all good learning lessons.
So you didn't have any investors in American Rebel at all. You just bankrolled the whole thing yourself?
Yep, exactly. And so, and that was part of why, in the beginning phase, I didn't even have an office for the first, I guess, 4 months or so, because I needed to kind of build up a little bit of bankroll so I could at least have the office. So yeah, it was a very grassroots operation. And, I kind of cringe a little bit when I look back on it, because it was just, the building is like a little bit dilapidated, but I put my own spin on it. Like, American Rebel was very bold in its style. This is very like mid 2000s with like old English writing, and like I had like red and white opposing walls. And I remember even like as the company was sort of winding down and we were trying to be like more serious and credible and more like fashion, especially the women at the office would complain like this like look is not great. And it's funny because I would have parties at my office, and I'd have celebrities and have these celebrity parties. And, my wife now is an event planner, like a very elite event planner. And we do everything like a very high style now. And I just think about the fact that like I was doing these like parties, and, it has that like really like yellowy, terrible light, the long pole lights that are in the ceiling, and the popcorn ceiling and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know, I guess when you're young, you don't think about that as much. At the same time, it was like all I could afford. So, it was just doing the best with what I could. And, it was a fun run. It was towards the end, it was a little bit, tenuous after the crash in the economy in 2008. Up until then, 2006 to 2008 was fantastic, like just grew year over year. And then after 2008, it just became, that was the last like 5 years of the company or so. It just became more arduous. There was a lot more work to be done for less money. Everybody was grinding. Everybody was turning their pockets inside out. The fashion business is not, unless you're talking about the biggest brands in the world, is not like a tremendous moneymaker sort of place. I enjoyed it, but like at the same time, it like wasn't like financially fulfilling. And so, eventually I just realized the writing was on the wall, and it was time to kind of cut bait and move on.
Yeah, I remember, I think you did a clothing line with Scott Weiland. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. Did a clothing line with Scott Weiland, and then also did one with Chester Bennington from Linkin Park. Also did one with Gene Simmons and a brand called Dussault. I did a bunch of fashion collaborations with celebrities. My favorite one by far and away was the Scott Weiland collection. I was completely the catalyst for that. Some of the others I kind of jumped on as, PR, but that was something that I built actually. He wanted to do it. We met at Von Dutch. We met actually at the World Music Awards, and he told me that he wanted to do this. And he came into the Von Dutch store, and we ended up spending a whole afternoon together. It was literally one of my rock gods, so I felt like I was walking on the clouds, just like hanging with them. And then he told me he wanted to do this line, and I kind of knew that I was about to jump out of the Von Dutch thing. And I thought that the life cycle of the brand was pretty much over. So I recommended to him that we take a beat and we wait on this. And then, once I started my PR company, I started working with a client called English Laundry. I don't think they're still around anymore, but they were very much like David Bowie sort of styling, like British mod rock. Like it was still like suits and button downs and stuff like that, but it had like a rock and roll feel to it. And I remember that Weiland's favorite artist, of all was David Bowie. And so I was like, this is perfect. So I ran it by the designer, this guy, Chris Wicks. He's like this very brash English guy. And when I suggested it to him, he goes, "Oh, I love me a fractured rock star." And so, hilarious. I'll never forget that. Never forget that line. And he knew that Scott had all these issues, but he loved it. It's sort of rock and roll, sex, drugs, and rock and roll or whatever. And so, yeah, the collaboration ended up happening, and me and Chris, the designer, would go over to Scott's house. Actually, he was, not one to leave the house all that much. So he would invite us over to his house out in Valley Village, and we would go each season and go spend an entire afternoon with them and show him clothing swatches and influence pictures, pictures of David Bowie and old rock groups that he loved and stuff like that. And honestly, it was one of the most rewarding things ever of my career. The brand ultimately met its demise, and sadly Scott did as well, due to substance issues. But it was so cool. And this because we used to play their songs in our band Rapture back in the day. So I think every song that we ever played, I felt like I owned it in some sort of way. And so it was super cool to spend that time with him and to do something creative and help one of your like rock star idols in accomplishing a dream of his.
So did you have an opportunity to talk music with him at all? Was that something that you got a chance to do? I mean, I'm sure you guys were focused on this business venture that you were working on, but did you have an opportunity to chat with him about, music and things of that nature?
Yeah, no, we definitely spent a lot of time together, and would put on music even when we were designing at his house. And it was a really, really fun. I never had the nerve to tell him that we played his songs or anything like that, or that we should jam or anything. But I also went to his studio with him a bunch of times too, and I remember we did he got back together with he was with Velvet Revolver at that time, and then he reunited with Stone Temple Pilots. And I remember there was a Rolling Stone shoot about the reunion, and I got to go to that and got to meet the DeLeo brothers and Eric Kretz, who are all Stone Temple Pilots members. And it was a very interesting day. I mean, Scott was his own character, that's for sure. And those guys were always like really normal, down to earth guys, and I could kind of even at that point see the the difference. They knew that getting back together was a good thing. It was great business. Everybody loved Stone Temple Pilots, but it was sort of like going back to that like bad relationship and remembering the things that kind of drove you nuts about that person. So I don't think it lasted all that long. I think they did one more maybe one more album. I can't remember if it was one more album or if they just did a tour, and then it just it didn't go on after that, unfortunately. But super cool timing for me to get to be a part of that. And I actually met him, like I said, at the World Music Awards, and it was with Velvet Revolver, and they had won an award that night. So I got to meet Matt Sorum, who's become a friend of mine, and Izzy, who was their bassist. So it was really cool. Like they were a really fun rock act at that time.
Yeah, I remember meeting those guys, or a couple of those guys, at the Firm back in the day. Yeah. I remember Dean came in one time, and he was running late for a meeting, and I think he was meeting with Peter Katzis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, Peter name? Was the one who was representing Stone Temple Pilots. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he had a meeting with Peter, and he was running late, and he asked me, he said, hey man, do you know how to turn back time? And I had no idea what he was talking about. I just kind of chuckled. And then I remember he said, look, I'm running late for a meeting, but I need something to eat. I haven't eaten, in a couple of days or whatever. And I remember telling him that I don't really have anything that's edible, but I do have this pizza from a couple days ago that we've been meaning to throw out. And I sat there with him and watched him eat 2 or 3 slices of this unedible pizza, inedible pizza that I was like, I don't think you want this, but he ate quite a bit of it and was thankful. He was very grateful for it. So those guys were, pretty wild, pretty fast and wild back then. But so yeah, talk to me about. So that's really cool about your opportunity to work with Scott Weiland like that. Tell me, when did you close down American Rebel and move into your next venture?
Yeah, so that was September of 2013. I just had come to a point where it just didn't seem to make financial sense anymore, and it wasn't, again, for me, like having fun in business is critical, and I just remember it not being fun anymore. So closed down my shop the day after my birthday in September of 2013, and kind of just didn't have a backup plan necessarily, and kind of wandered out into the world and looked to figure out what was next.
What happened next? What was the next step in your trajectory?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, my brother had moved out to LA maybe like 4 years before that, and he had initially come out to like work with me at American Rebel, but he wasn't like a fashion guy. He didn't make any sense for it. He tried to do a couple things as like a new business. I gave him the title of like VP of new business, and he brought in a client or something once, but he started kind of doing his own thing and getting into like the early world of influence and social media handles, and so he was experiencing some success on Twitter, creating verticalized accounts called niche accounts. So I'd created at fashion and style, at travel, and some of these accounts have gotten really big, multi-million followers. And he started seeing brands were actually looking to advertise or pay to get that handle to push out a message for them, and sort of an aha moment, sort of this is something you can get paid for. This is kind of crazy, but then also realizing that industry was completely raw and sort of like the Wild West, and that there hadn't been any structure, accountability, data, or anything that had been brought to it. So he started like working on the early model of that, and I saw that as really interesting, and knew that I could help in my own way, which has always been about relationships, culture, being creative, and knowing celebrities. And what was happening was that the influencers have kind of become the new sort of celebrity, and so I had this idea to bring the business to life in a physical sense by doing a party at Coachella. And so we ended up renting a mansion at Coachella, during the Coachella Music Festival in the Coachella Valley, and rented a mansion, not a huge mansion. By mansion, I'm like air quotes. It's like 5-bedroom house or something like that. And at the time, these influencers didn't have much money anyway. Like, they were all mostly just getting started, and they were young. So we invited them to come and stay at this house, and we probably had like 40 of them stay the first time. So because there weren't like 40 beds in a 5-bedroom house, we literally had cots, and they were like sleeping on cots. But it was an awesome experience. It was like basically like get paid to party, like come and be a part of these campaigns. We have food and refreshments and everything for them, and a place to hang out. A mansion in the Coachella Valley near the festival. All their friends or all the people of the industry would be there. And so we conceived this idea, and worked on it for like 4 months to bring it to fruition. And when we did that, I reached out using all my press contacts and reached out to Entertainment Tonight, which is the biggest entertainment news show in the world. And I'd reached out to a ton of my press contacts, and they were one of the only ones who said yes. And I was like, what are they saying yes for? This is crazy. So I called the executive producer, who was a friend of mine, and kind of advocated against myself in a way. I said, I don't know if you know who's coming to this, but it's not Kim Kardashian, it's not Paris Hilton. It's like these influencers that, like, she was a little bit older. I was like, your kids or like your nieces and nephews, something like that, would know. And she's like, yeah, actually, I understand that, Chris. I spoke to my staff and said, we're the biggest news show in the world, entertainment news show in the world. We're also the oldest skewing, and what can we do to be young and with the times? And that youngest part of her staff and interns said influencers. So she said, based on my faith in you, Chris, and she and I had worked together at Sundance Film Festival. I had helped produce a lounge with Gibson Guitar and Entertainment Tonight and Getty Images on Main Street there, and I did it with her for 2 years. So she remembered me from there and knew that I was a good guy. And so between her faith in me and what the team told her, she sent me a news crew. And so the Saturday afternoon of Coachella weekend, we got an entire day to shoot and interviewed me and my brother, interviewed all the influencers, people like Logan Paul, who'd never been on TV before, got him like on national TV as a 16-year-old. And that, ended up, spending the day with them. And then Monday came around and, on the national TV segment about Coachella, they did like 2 minutes and 20 seconds about my house, this party. And they only did about 40 seconds on the 200,000 person festival down the street. So, we knew that we had something special, and, we duplicated that a few more times. I think we did 3 total influential houses, and then realized that the liability, especially once we got investment, was too great. So didn't continue on that path, but, ended up making a really great sizzle reel for it. And then use that in some of our fundraising efforts. And, I think it was a great inflection point because all of the biggest influencers now knew about us because of that. And they, kind of the word of mouth spread like wildfire in the community. And we were able to grow our, influencer network from, dozens or maybe a few hundred at most, and then expand it rapidly. These days it's 3.5 million creators on our platform. But, those were simpler times. And I think that event had a lot to do with, kind of creating that hype cycle where we had all the top creators with us there and kind of put everyone on a notice as to who influential was.
Talk to me about the monetization of that back then. Like, what did it look like like, how did the business function? Explain that to me. Like, I understand you're throwing these parties at Coachella. You've got this house. You've got all these influencers coming in, and it's the hip place to be. A lot of young influencers without a lot of money, and they're coming and they're partying and having a great time and meeting each other. And I know you're building relationships with them, but how did the monetization work for the business back at that time?
Yeah, sure. So what's interesting is that like the parties were definitely not like the main component of it at all. It was sort of just a hype sort of thing. And what you could do, and you can still do this, is you can do influencer social media activations at events. And there are great backdrops for them. So brands do that kind of stuff all the time. But the true core of our business and what we typically do is not through events. It's through running a media campaign using social media influencers. And so basically we hire all of these influencers, and we have our platform actually chooses them based on data and analytics that prove that they're the best influencers. And we present those influencers to a client. Client chooses, because there is a great amount of it that's, data driven, but there's also still the human element. So, we would give those options to the brands, and then they would pick a set of influencers based on our recommendations. And then we would create, they might come to us with a brief of what they want to do. We would then work with the influencer to come up with the creative for it, run the campaign, which was, have the influencers post on their channels about the content. And then we would give a full back-end report that showed all the results of it. And, we would continue to do that over and over with the brands that we continue to work with.
I understand you're spreading awareness about the brand. If you've got an influencer posting, you're spreading awareness. Now, are these also like opportunities to purchase the product, or is it more about brand awareness?
Yeah, in the early stages of it, it was very much awareness based because the technologies hadn't really been built out. But over the years, we continued to innovate our technology. We created AI influencer marketing with IBM Watson back in 2016. So we were able to actually utilize AI to help better identify the best influencers, having the AI read everything that they put out on the history of social and what brands have put out on social and analyze that into personality characteristics. And so that was one of our first innovations. And then eventually we got to a point where, we're the leader in the world at what we do. And the main reason is because we bring it back to actual return on investment, what they call ROI in our business. And that's because we can measure, did somebody see an ad that we did on social, an influencer post, and then go into a McDonald's, and we can measure that the foot traffic went into the store. We can also measure, did somebody end up tuning into something as a result of being promoted to on social, so we can affect TV tune-in lift. And then probably the greatest thing that we can do is we actually have the ability in like grocery stores and drugstores to measure actual sales. So if somebody went into a store and then purchased something using their loyalty cards, we could actually track against that and see if somebody actually made a purchase as a result of the ads that we did on social. So it became very results driven, and that's where the industry is today. Is it's all about it's table stakes at this point to have brand recognition. That's obvious. That's part of why you do it. But the real reason that that we get the great results that we do is because we can draw it back to actual sales, foot traffic, and tune-in results.
Yeah. So this is fascinating stuff. What platforms are most effective right now? Like, I know you've got influencers on all these different platforms. Which ones are really hip right now? Which ones are really crushing it in terms of, the ROI and the other metrics that you talked about?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram has been a mainstay for many years. I would say TikTok is sort of the hot newer thing, though it's been around a few years now. And then Snapchat has recently gotten a little bit more results driven. They weren't letting people get the data that they needed. Brands couldn't get the data that they needed. And so that was problematic, but they're actually making big strides now to actually be a part of that. So that's becoming sort of a highly requested platform. But I would say those are like the major ones. You still get people who want to do Facebook, but that sort of tends to be like older skewing. And then there's people that still do YouTube. YouTube is something we do a little bit in. When we entered the industry, it was sort of like the industry standard. And we looked to kind of, there was a bunch of companies called multi-channel networks at that time that were very heavy into that business. So we went into these other platforms, to try to kind of go against the grain on that. And it paid off really well. We still do some YouTube campaigns, but I would say the core of it is probably Instagram and TikTok these days.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was wondering about YouTube because I would assume that YouTube would be one of the biggest ones, not knowing, not really knowing your industry. I would assume that YouTube, so was that kind of the original place where it started and then it spread out from there?
Yeah, I would say in the early days it was YouTube and Twitter. Twitter eventually became just a place where the engagement wasn't that great, and it was much more text-based. It wasn't as much like rich media, even though you can do photos and videos. So, Twitter had a few-year run where it was relevant to us, and then it kind of dialed back a bit. And then Instagram really just kind of took off. And I think to this day, that tends to be like the main place where people look to do campaigns. But TikTok is definitely in high demand. And, these days, I think, a lot of times we'll get, clients that want to do across the board. And so we could literally spread it out into 2, 3, even 4 platforms. So it just depends on the content. YouTube tends to be a little bit more longer form content. So I think typically when you're talking about like brand content, unless you're creating a series where you have a little bit of branding inside of it, people's attention span for like advertising is more concentrated into shorter periods of time. So I think you see that more with Instagram and TikTok and short form platforms.
I got you. So so you started back in 2013, and tell me about the growth of the company and how it was that you were able to scale the business, because you all have just grown. It's been an exponential curve for you guys. I feel like, you talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was, I'm happy that my brother was able to identify early on that this was a hot industry and that there was a huge appetite for it. So I think, first of all, we got into a great business at a very early period of time. And we constantly looked to innovate. Like I was saying, we productized things. We created AI influencer marketing and, made sure that it fit into the guidelines of what advertising agencies were looking for. So we could work with both the advertising. In fact, in the beginning, it was almost exclusively advertising agencies. As things went on, we would go brand direct, and now it's sort of a mix of those things. But very early on, we had to appeal to the agencies. And so, really had the first couple of years was a lot of education, just teaching about what influencer marketing was, how to do it, best practices, all that sort of stuff. Then I would say maybe like halfway through the journey, like maybe 2017, 18, it became fairly ubiquitous and people, expected to do influencer marketing. And now it's, a mandate for the most part. So, we've positioned ourselves well from early on, created very, very innovative technologies and constantly iterated, made a better mousetrap at all times. And then, from my side of things, my talent and gift has always been marketing and public relations. And so I've been able to, infuse my talents into that. And we're without question the most talked about company in our space. And that's due in large part to our really strong PR efforts and constantly being in the headlines.
And I know you had a couple of really big announcements this week.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we had it's been a busy week, back-to-back huge announcements. So yesterday we announced, so this is the second year we've curated or co-curated alongside Forbes, Forbes' top creator list, which is a list of the 50 biggest and most relevant creators of our time. Forbes being a preeminent business publication, largely weights it on how much money these influencers make. But it's not solely on that. There are people lower down the list that make more money than the people that are higher on the list, but they factored in things like entrepreneurialism and engagement rates and, a number of different factors that kind of decided a weighted scale. And so, it's been fun. Like we did it last year to great success, and they had us back again this year. And it's quite a lift because you gotta reach out to all the influencers, get them to be aboard for it, and then even produce financials, which most people don't want to open that up to people, but it's sort of a requirement. And luckily people want to be in Forbes, and it's actually really fun yesterday to have the list go out and see these creators that are friends of mine have their dreams come true, and be like, I remember I saw one girl that I'm friends with, it's like, Mom, we made it, that's really awesome. And to be a conduit to that is really fun. And it's great to work with the Forbes team, and we do a big celebration for it. Celebration this year will happen in a couple months in November, but it's really great to see the culmination of that. So that was a really exciting announcement. And then today we partnered with Ad Age, which is one of the biggest advertising trade publications in our industry, and we created what's called a custom report. And it's basically an analysis of our industry, kind of talks about all of the exciting trajectory of the industry, and then also has 5 case studies in it from a number of our top brand partners. We primarily work with Fortune 500 companies, and so this is the likes of McDonald's and Hilton and TIAA and Essence and Toyota. So really like a who's who, and each campaign kind of represented different capabilities and kind of got to showcase all of these talents that we have as a company that make us unique. And so It was a really exciting piece to put out. We've been working on it for, I'd say, 4 or 5 months, and many revisions and many permissions needed from brands and all that sort of stuff. So seeing the culmination of that today was really exciting.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that you primarily work with Fortune 500 companies, and these are massive companies. Is there any room in this influencer marketing world for small businesses? Is there any, are they able to play in the game at all, or is
1,000%? Yeah. Oh, it's actually the great thing about it is it's totally scalable, and there's influencer marketing capabilities of all sizes and shapes. You can be an independent company with one employee, and you can employ influencer marketing tactics. Granted, you're not going to be able to hire Influential or one of the other companies in the space, because at Fortune 500 level, obviously you can imagine that's 6 and 7 figure budgets. But if you have a cool product or service or whatever, you can do this yourself. You can get on your social platforms, either do it through your own personal social channels or create a business and do it through those channels. But it's basically the greatest. Social media is the greatest word of mouth tool that's ever existed. So it's basically just like a bullhorn for you to be able to get out there and promote your business. So if you have a product company, get your product into the hands of people, and do an exchange with them. Say, I will gift you this product in an exchange. I'd like for you to post about it or do a story about it on Instagram or whatever. And so, yeah, for very little money, you can do it yourself. Obviously, you won't get the data and the analytics and that sort of stuff that we do, but there's definitely the ability to use social media to your advantage and tap influencers. And it's oftentimes you can just go to their pages and there's some sort of a contact on there, so you can email them through that, or you can direct message them. And doesn't mean that if you scale up to larger scale influencers, they're going to want money. They don't just take freebie stuff. But sort of like small businesses can use small influencers, and a lot of times the most effective use of influencers is finding people who are authentic to a category. So if you're selling fishing poles or something like that, just giving you a wild example, you could probably find fishing influencers that maybe have 5,000-10,000 followers, but have domain expertise, and the audience that follows them because of that domain expertise. And if they're recommending a product or a service or whatever, I think that you stand a pretty good chance of gaining some new followers and fans and traction as a result.
Is this something that you could do for a law office, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me how that would work. Talk that through with me. I'm trying to think of how I could use this.
I mean, you could potentially trade for legal services and have them do a testimonial for you and talk about how when they used Irons at Irons Law Firm, that Gib was so gracious to them and professional, and that he got their case wrapped up quickly and got a positive result. I wouldn't say that law firms are the typical customer, and I don't even recall necessarily that we've ever handled that, but I absolutely think that it's something that you could use an influencer for. I think it's just, there's that side of it. What I think would probably be the most authentic is that side of perspective. But then there's also just the possibility that you could pay influencers and they could post about you, and they might not have that personalized story, so it might not be as authentic, but they have eyeballs. And if you were to find people in your local market, especially that have large audiences, you can utilize them to draw attention to your firm.
So have you ever worked with Mr. Beast?
We have spoken about working with Mr. Beast. He actually was number 1 on that Forbes list. He is the highest grossing influencer in the world right now, and it's several $1 million to work with him. So I'm hoping sooner or later, yes, but I don't believe that we've currently done a project with him yet.
Do you know where he lives by chance?
I believe in Los Angeles. I'm not sure though.
He lives in Greenville, North Carolina.
Is that right?
He lives here. Yeah, he lives here in Greenville, where I'm located. So,
do you see him out?
I've never seen him out, but people that I know have worked for him in the past. You know, like I know guys that do the videographers and editors and stuff like that, and they've worked for Mr. Beast. But yeah, he lives here in Greenville, North Carolina. He's got
Is he from there?
A house and I don't know if he is or not, but he must be. I mean, he must be. He lives here in a neighborhood right down the road from me, and he's bought several of the houses in that neighborhood, going around basically knocking on doors and saying, hey, look, are you trying to keep your house, or is this something that you would entertain selling? And he's offered people like all cash, you know, like $100,000 more, like outrageously more than what their house is worth, to like get out now so that he can bring his people in and have them all living in the same neighborhood.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
But yeah. Anyway, he's right down the road from me. Like, he lives in a subdivision that's probably 2 miles from my house.
That's
but
super
I've
cool.
never seen him. Yeah, it is pretty cool. I've never seen him before, but I know he's super big in your industry. And
oh yeah, the biggest.
I did not.
He made 35, 40, but actually it might have been like 60 million, something. I mean, he makes crazy money. And it's funny, actually, I've heard on interviews of him, he actually isn't into like all the flash. You're probably not going to catch him like riding around in a Lambo or anything like that. He just wants to be able to do his craft at the highest level. And that's sort of been like what's been unique about him is he will create a multi-million-dollar, video. Like when Squid Game was the big game, or the big show on Netflix. He actually created an actual Squid Game situation that was like, I think it was like $4 million or something like that. But that's the extent he goes to for his audience. And when you're big on YouTube, you actually get paid for the views because they do advertising in between it. So there's something called Google AdSense that they pay you on. And when you have as many clicks as him, you get paid a lot of money. So aside from being able to do brand deals with him, he's made a lot, probably the lion's share of his money just through the audience that he gets on YouTube. So he takes that money and reinvests it in constantly raising the bar for the content that he's creating. So it's an interesting model. It's worked very, very well for him. And he's, as a result, probably the most well-recognized influencer on the planet.
I actually didn't really know anything about him until, I don't know, maybe a year ago or, 1 to 2 years ago. I don't know how long he's been doing it, but I assume he's been at the top for a long time from what I hear from other people. But I had never heard of him till, maybe a year ago. Yeah. And then I found out that he actually lives here in Greenville, which is pretty cool.
Fascinating. I mean, I don't remember hearing about him longer than 4 or 5 years ago. I'm sure he's been at it for a while. I mean, sort of thing doesn't happen overnight, but he sure got big.
Tell me, what do you see as the next step for influential? I mean, you've had all this massive success. Kind of, let's talk, in long time periods. Like, let's talk, 10 years from now. Where do you see influential being? Hard to say,
I
right?
couldn't even
really
guess
hard
because
to say.
Because the rate of innovation is just so great. I mean, just this year alone, generative AI came into the frame, and all of a sudden everything is crazy, and everybody's talking about AI. So I can't say what I expect that world to be like. It's too far out to project. So I mean, I would say the shorter term, next few years sort of goal is make this company into $1 billion company that they call a unicorn. I think that's a very realistic possibility. We're not that far away from it, and the industry keeps growing. And even though the economy is in sort of a mucky place right now, our industry keeps growing and we keep growing. So there's a lot of blue sky ahead.
Yeah. Chris, talk to me a little bit about your schedule. I mean, I know that when we met up back in May, you mentioned to me that you travel, I think it was like 180 days a year or something like that.
Not quite that much, thank God. That'd be half the time. I'd say close to 100, close to 100 days.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I've made a real goal to be at all of the most important social and the tentpole events of the year, the big moments. So I'm at the Super Bowl and South by Southwest and Cannes Lions Festival and Advertising Week and so many other little things. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of our success has just been sending our best people out, to meet the people. And there's so many marketing events, and if you tap into these things and you have existing relationships, we've built ourselves to the point that when we go to these events, we know a ton of people already, and our credibility is such now that it's way easier than it used to be. So if we can just show up at the right places and do a little bit of recon before as to who's going to be there, do some outreach and tell them that we'll be there, we can set up meetings pretty easily. And really, I see myself as the top of the marketing funnel. I'm constantly trying to feed new clients into that, introduce them into our company, and then hand that off to our business development and our sales team and have them drive that business home. So that's been a big part of what I do. And within that, a lot of times there's speaking engagement opportunities. So and also another side facet of it is I have all these celebrity relationships, and I've started booking them to speak at a lot of these events. And so in some cases, I actually get to interview the celebrities and the influencers myself, or my brother gets a chance to do it. And it's really been a way for us to make a huge impact and really make our company that much more prevalent in the industry.
Let me ask you this: how do you map out all that travel? Is that something that you sit down at the beginning of the year and you say, these are all the events I'm going to do? Or is it something that there's new events popping up all the time that you did not plan to go to, that you're like, I need to go to this?
Yeah, I have like a set.
What's your planning?
I have a very set agenda at this point. I mean, we're nearly 10 years into our business now. So the popular inflection points do exist. I start the beginning of the year at CES, which is the big electronics trade show in Las Vegas, and then I go to the Super Bowl, and then I go to South by Southwest, and then I go to the Cannes Lions Cannes Lions Advertising Creativity Festival. Then I go to Advertising Week. Those are sort of like the staple events, but then there's all sorts of actually started going to NBA All-Star pretty much every year. F1, the racing series, has become really popular. So I've started going to some of those events. And then, there's all sorts of serendipity throughout the year, new events that pop up, or, last minute opportunities, crazy things that we get the opportunity to jump on, get invited to something cool. So yeah, it's a little bit of straightforward planning, a little bit of serendipity.
Cool. Well, Chris, look, I really appreciate you coming on today. For people that want to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. They can reach out to me probably via email would be the easiest. And it's my first initial C and my last name, Detert, DETERT, at influential.co, like .co. Okay,
cool. Well, Chris, look, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Gib. It was fun.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Go Big with Gib. If you haven't already, go follow us on social media at Gib Irons. We'll see you next time.